While the world watches Burkina Faso's war against terrorism, another battle is unfolding far from the front lines. It is quieter, slower, and rarely leads international headlines. Yet it may decide whether the country survives with dignity or remains vulnerable for generations. This is the battle for food sovereignty. Imagine a nation reclaiming territory from armed groups, only to discover that it still depends on foreign ships, foreign warehouses, and foreign currency to feed its own people. What kind of independence is that? Captain Ibrahim Traore has repeatedly framed this question in stark terms. A country that cannot feed itself cannot fully control its future. That is why agriculture has become more than an economic program in Burkina Faso. It is being treated as a second front in the struggle for national survival. While soldiers defend roads and villages, farmers are being asked to defend the nation's food supply. While security forces fight to recover land, engineers, cooperatives, and rural communities are being mobilized to make that land productive again. Stay with us, because this story is not simply about tractors, seeds, or harvests. It is about whether an African nation can turn crisis into the foundation of a new development model. And if you believe Africa's future deserves serious attention beyond the usual headlines, subscribe and join this growing conversation. To understand the urgency, we must look at the Burkina Faso Traore inherited in 2022. For years, violence had forced families from their homes and separated farmers from their fields. Roads became dangerous, local markets were disrupted, and entire communities lost access to the land that once sustained them. At the same time, harsh weather, weak irrigation, and rising food prices placed additional pressure on households already living with uncertainty. This created a painful contradiction. Agriculture employed a large share of the population, yet the country still depended heavily on imported staples and processed food. Farmers produced crops, but limited storage and processing meant part of the harvest could spoil or be sold cheaply. Meanwhile, finished products returned at higher prices. For Traore, this was not only poverty, it was strategic exposure. A nation dependent on outside food can be weakened by war, sanctions, shipping disruptions, currency shortages, or sudden price increases. Even a successful military campaign could be undermined if citizens remained hungry and the state continued spending scarce foreign currency on basic food. This is why the new agricultural drive was presented with the urgency of a national campaign. The objective was not merely to produce more during one good rainy season. It was to rebuild the country's ability to cultivate, irrigate, process, store, and distribute its own food. The first principle was simple. Security protects the land, but agriculture gives that land meaning. Without farmers returning, water flowing, and markets functioning, recovered territory remains only a line on a map. With food production restored, it becomes part of a living nation again. And that is where Traore's quieter war for independence truly begins for Burkina Faso. Food sovereignty did not begin as an agricultural slogan for Ibrahim Traore. It began as a definition of independence itself. In speech after speech, he has argued that political freedom means very little. If a nation cannot produce the food its people depend on every single day, a flag, a national anthem, and recognized borders may symbolize sovereignty, but they cannot guarantee it. According to this philosophy, true independence starts when a country can meet its most essential needs through its own labor, resources, and institutions. This idea reaches far beyond farming. Traore often links food sovereignty with energy sovereignty, technological sovereignty, and economic sovereignty. Together, they form a broader vision in which Burkina Faso gradually reduces structural dependence on external actors while strengthening domestic production. Rather than viewing agriculture as a traditional sector left behind by modernization, his government presents it as the foundation upon which every other sector can grow. This vision also echoes ideas that many Africans associate with the legacy of Thomas Sankara. Although the historical circumstances are very different, both leaders emphasized dignity through self-reliance and questioned economic systems that left African countries exporting raw materials while importing finished goods at far higher prices. For many supporters of Pan-Africanism, the comparison is not about creating another Sankara. Instead, it reflects a belief that Africa must reclaim greater control over its resources and development priorities. But philosophy alone cannot feed a nation. Ideas become meaningful only when they are translated into action. That is where Traore attempted to move beyond speeches and launch policies designed to reshape agricultural production across Burkina Faso. One of the government's most visible initiatives has been the nationwide agricultural offensive that provides farmers with tractors, power tillers, irrigation pumps, improved seeds, and fertilizer. The objective is straightforward: reduce production costs, expand cultivated land, and increase harvests while encouraging farmers to adopt more modern techniques. Rather than limiting assistance to a few demonstration projects, the government has presented these programs as part of a national mobilization effort. Young people have also been encouraged to form agricultural cooperatives instead of viewing farming as a last resort. Agricultural engineers have been deployed closer to rural communities, so technical knowledge reaches producers directly. Public institutions, local authorities, and community organizations have all been asked to contribute to the country's agricultural transformation. The underlying message is that food production is no longer only the responsibility of farmers. It has become a shared national mission. This philosophy changes the way agriculture is perceived. Instead of representing poverty, it becomes a symbol of resilience, dignity, and national security. Every field cultivated, every irrigation system repaired, and every successful harvest is presented as another step toward reducing dependence on external suppliers. Whether this ambitious vision ultimately succeeds will depend on long-term results rather than political rhetoric. Yet, one thing is already clear: Ibrahim Traore has fundamentally changed the national conversation by placing food sovereignty at the very center of Burkina Faso's future. The vision of food sovereignty would have remained only an inspiring speech if it had not been backed by concrete action. Recognizing this, Ibrahim Traore's administration launched one of the country's most ambitious agricultural mobilization campaigns, aiming to transform Burkina Faso from a nation heavily dependent on imported food into one capable of feeding itself through its own production. At the center of this effort stands the National Agropastoral and Fisheries Offensive, a program designed to increase agricultural output while modernizing farming practices across the country. Instead of relying solely on traditional cultivation methods, the government began distributing tractors, power tillers, irrigation pumps, improved seeds, fertilizers, and other essential equipment to farming communities. The objective was not simply to help individual farmers, but to strengthen the productive capacity of the entire agricultural sector. Mechanization represented one of the biggest shifts. For decades, many farmers relied primarily on manual labor and animal traction, limiting both productivity and the amount of land that could be cultivated. By introducing modern machinery, the government hoped to reduce labor constraints, shorten planting seasons, and increase harvests. And more importantly, mechanization was intended to encourage younger generations to see agriculture as a profession with a future rather than a symbol of poverty. Water management became another strategic priority. Burkina Faso lies within the Sahel, where rainfall is often unpredictable and drought remains a constant threat. Instead of depending entirely on seasonal rains, authorities expanded irrigation projects, rehabilitated dams, introduced solar-powered pumping systems, and invested in water infrastructure capable of supporting year-round farming. Every hectare brought under reliable irrigation represented another step toward reducing the country's vulnerability to climate shocks. However, Traore's strategy extended beyond machines and infrastructure. He repeatedly emphasized that national mobilization required every sector of society to contribute. Agricultural engineers were encouraged to leave administrative offices and work directly with rural communities. Young people were urged to establish farming cooperatives and participate in food production. Local authorities coordinated agricultural initiatives, while technical experts provided training on improved cultivation methods. Even institutions traditionally unrelated to farming were encouraged to support production efforts whenever possible. This broad mobilization reflected a deeper philosophy. Food security could not depend on government ministries alone. It required cooperation between farmers, engineers, educators, local communities, and public institutions. Agriculture was no longer viewed as the responsibility of one profession, but as a shared national obligation. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this campaign is how it redefined the meaning of national service. Instead of measuring patriotism only through military sacrifice, the government promoted the idea that cultivating fields, improving irrigation, increasing yields, and strengthening local food systems were equally important acts of defending the nation. Every successful harvest became another step toward reducing dependence on imported food, protecting foreign currency reserves, and building greater economic resilience. Whether these policies ultimately achieve their long-term goals remains to be seen. Agriculture depends on weather, security, infrastructure, investment, and consistent management over many years. Yet the scale of the mobilization demonstrates that Burkina Faso is attempting something far larger than an ordinary agricultural reform. It is trying to redefine food production as a cornerstone of national sovereignty itself. Food sovereignty is not measured only by what grows in the fields. It is also measured by who controls what happens after the harvest. For decades, many African countries exported raw agricultural products while importing expensive processed food from abroad. Farmers worked hard, but much of the economic value was created somewhere else. Ibrahim Traore's government has argued that this cycle must end if Burkina Faso hopes to achieve genuine economic independence. The reasoning is straightforward. A country that exports raw tomatoes but imports canned tomato paste captures only a small fraction of the final value. The same applies to rice, dairy products, cashew nuts, fruit, and many other agricultural commodities. Then, as long as processing takes place overseas, jobs, industrial knowledge, and profits follow the same path. Breaking that pattern requires more than increasing production. It requires building industries capable of transforming local harvests into finished products. This explains why food processing has become an essential part of Burkina Faso's agricultural strategy. New facilities have been developed to process tomatoes, improve rice milling, expand grain processing, and strengthen other value-added industries. These investments are designed not only to reduce food imports, but also to create employment opportunities for thousands of workers involved in transportation, storage, packaging, manufacturing, and distribution. The tomato industry provides one of the clearest examples. For years, farmers often struggled with post-harvest losses because fresh tomatoes spoil quickly if they cannot reach consumers or processing plants in time. As processing capacity expands, farmers gain more reliable buyers, waste can be reduced, and locally produced tomato products have a better chance of competing with imported brands. Instead of exporting opportunities, the country keeps more economic activity within its own borders. The same philosophy extends to rice production. Growing more rice is important, but milling, packaging, quality control, and marketing are equally critical. A finished product sold under a national brand generates greater value than unprocessed grain leaving the farm. This approach encourages domestic entrepreneurship while strengthening confidence in products made inside Burkina Faso. Livestock and fisheries are also being integrated into this broader vision. Producing milk, meat, fish, and poultry is only the first stage. Cold storage, processing facilities, transportation networks, and food safety standards determine whether these products can reach consumers efficiently and compete with imports. By investing across the entire supply chain, the government hopes to transform agriculture from a subsistence activity into a modern economic engine. Perhaps the greatest lesson behind this strategy is that sovereignty cannot stop at the farm gate. A nation may harvest abundant crops, but if foreign companies dominate processing, branding, and distribution, much of the wealth created by those harvests still leaves the country. For Ibrahim Traore, food sovereignty means controlling every major step of the journey, from the seed planted in the soil to the finished product placed on a family's dining table. In his vision, true independence is built not only by producing more food, but by ensuring that the greatest share of its value remains in the hands of the Burkinabe people. So, as Ibrahim Traore's agricultural agenda gained international attention, it also attracted growing criticism from foreign governments, international media, and policy analysts. Supporters describe his approach as a bold attempt to restore economic sovereignty. Critics argue that many of his promises remain unproven, while others question whether political realities will allow these reforms to succeed over the long term. Understanding this debate requires looking beyond slogans and examining both the achievements and the concerns surrounding his leadership. One of the strongest criticisms focuses on the political environment under Burkina Faso's transitional military government. Human rights organizations and several Western governments have expressed concerns about restrictions on political freedoms, media independence, and the delayed return to civilian rule. These issues remain important because sustainable development depends not only on economic policies, but also on transparent institutions capable of earning public trust. Another criticism centers on security. Despite military operations against extremist groups, large parts of Burkina Faso continue to experience violence and instability. Many farming communities still face enormous challenges in returning safely to their land. Critics argue that no agricultural strategy can fully succeed while insecurity continues to disrupt transportation, production, and local markets. There are also questions surrounding the ambitious claims often shared on social media. Videos celebrating enormous harvests, dramatic technological breakthroughs, or sweeping economic victories have circulated widely across digital platforms. While some projects are well documented, others are exaggerated or lack independent verification. This has led many observers to caution against confusing political messaging with measurable long-term results. However, criticism tells only part of the story. It is equally important to recognize what has actually changed. Agricultural equipment has been distributed, irrigation projects have expanded, food processing facilities have opened. Government policies have placed agriculture at the center of national development planning instead of treating it as a secondary concern. These are concrete policy directions rather than abstract political slogans. Perhaps Traore's greatest influence lies in changing the national mindset. Agriculture is no longer presented simply as a means of survival for poor rural communities. Instead, it has become a symbol of patriotism, resilience, and economic independence. Farmers are increasingly portrayed as contributors to national security, while food production itself is framed as an essential component of sovereignty. Whether history ultimately judges Ibrahim Traore as a transformational leader will depend less on speeches than on measurable outcomes. Future generations will ask difficult questions. Did farmers earn higher incomes? Did food become more affordable? Did young people choose to remain in agriculture because it offered genuine opportunity? Did Burkina Faso reduce its dependence on imported food without creating new forms of dependency elsewhere? Those answers cannot be fully known today. But regardless of where one stands politically, there is little doubt that Traore has fundamentally changed the conversation. The debate is no longer simply about defeating terrorism. It is also about whether a nation can secure its future by first securing the food on its own tables. Although Burkina Faso's progress has attracted attention across Africa, the country's experience also offers important lessons that extend far beyond its borders. The central lesson is not that every nation should copy Burkina Faso's policies exactly. Every country has different geography, institutions, and economic conditions. Instead, the deeper lesson is that food security must be treated as a strategic national priority rather than simply another sector of the economy. Many African nations possess fertile land, abundant natural resources, and large agricultural workforces, yet they continue importing billions of dollars worth of food each year. This contradiction exposes governments to global price shocks, supply chain disruptions, and currency pressures that can quickly become political crises. Burkina Faso's current strategy challenges this pattern by arguing that investing in domestic food production should be viewed as an investment in national resilience. Another valuable lesson concerns the importance of building complete agricultural value chains. Producing more crops alone cannot transform an economy if processing, storage, transportation, and marketing remain underdeveloped. Every additional stage completed within the country creates new jobs, generates higher incomes, and allows a greater share of economic value to remain in local communities. Agriculture becomes not only a source of food, but also a driver of industrial development. At the same time, Burkina Faso's experience reminds policymakers that long-term success requires more than political determination. Modern irrigation systems must be maintained. Agricultural equipment requires trained operators and reliable maintenance. Farmers need access to credit, markets, technical education, and stable infrastructure. Without these supporting systems, ambitious reforms risk losing momentum after their initial launch. There is also an important diplomatic lesson. Pursuing greater self-reliance does not necessarily require rejecting international cooperation. Countries can strengthen domestic production while continuing to work with multiple international partners, provided that national priorities remain at the center of decision-making. True sovereignty is measured by the ability to make independent choices, not by complete isolation from the global economy. For supporters of Pan-Africanism, Burkina Faso represents something larger than one country's agricultural policy. It symbolizes the belief that Africa can gradually move beyond historical patterns of exporting raw materials while importing finished products. Whether this vision ultimately succeeds will depend on practical results rather than political symbolism, but it has already inspired conversations across the continent about self-reliance, economic dignity, and regional cooperation. Perhaps the most enduring contribution of Ibrahim Traore is not any single project, factory, or irrigation system. It is the simple but powerful question he has placed before his country and before Africa itself. Can genuine independence exist if a nation cannot feed its own people? The answer will not be written in speeches or political declarations. It will be written in the harvests of future seasons, in the prosperity of farming communities, and in the resilience of national economies. As this debate continues, one thing remains certain. The future of Africa will be shaped not only on battlefields or in diplomatic conferences, but also in the fields where millions of farmers work every day. If Captain Ibrahim Traore's vision succeeds, Burkina Faso may become far more than another headline in Africa New. It could become an enduring example of Pan-African determination, inspiring the African Union, strengthening the ideals of Pan-Africanism, and demonstrating that Ibrahim Traore's greatest legacy lies not only in defending a nation, but in helping it feed itself. If you found this story valuable, subscribe to the channel and join us for more in-depth discussions about the future of Africa. The story of Burkina Faso's pursuit of food sovereignty is still being written. No serious observer can claim that every challenge has been solved or that every objective has already been achieved. Security threats remain. Climate change continues to test agricultural production. Rural infrastructure still requires significant investment, and millions of people continue to face economic hardship. Yet history often remembers nations, not only for the obstacles they faced, but for the direction they chose when confronted by those obstacles. In many ways, Ibrahim Traore has attempted to redefine what national independence means in the 21st century. Rather than limiting sovereignty to military strength or political symbolism, he has placed food production at the center of the national conversation. His message suggests that a country capable of feeding its own people gains more than food security. It gains greater confidence in making independent economic decisions, stronger resilience against external shocks, and a firmer foundation for long-term development. Whether every policy introduced under his leadership succeeds is a question that only time can answer. Some projects will likely exceed expectations, while others may require adjustment or fail altogether. That reality is true for every nation pursuing large-scale reform. The true measure of success will not be found in political speeches or international headlines. It will be found in higher farm incomes, improved nutrition, stronger rural communities, growing local industries, and a generation of young people who see agriculture as an opportunity rather than a burden. The broader significance of Burkina Faso's experience reaches beyond its borders. Across Africa, governments continue searching for development models capable of creating jobs, strengthening domestic industries, and reducing dependence on imported essentials. If the country's agricultural transformation continues to produce measurable results over the coming years, it could provide valuable lessons for other nations facing similar economic and security challenges. At the same time, the experience also reminds policymakers that sovereignty requires more than determination. It demands accountable institutions, transparent management of public resources, continuous investment in education and infrastructure, and policies capable of surviving changes in political leadership. Lasting transformation is built by systems, not by individuals alone. Perhaps that is why this story continues to capture international attention. It is not simply the story of one president, one government, or one country. It is a story about an enduring question that many developing nations continue to ask. Can a nation achieve genuine independence if it cannot reliably feed its own citizens? For many supporters of Pan-African ideals, Burkina Faso has become an important symbol of that conversation. Whether viewed with optimism or skepticism, Captain Ibrahim Traore has helped place food sovereignty at the center of debates about Africa's future. As Africa New continues to unfold, the discussions surrounding Burkina Faso, the African Union, Pan-Africanism, and Ibrahim Traore will likely remain influential for years to come. If this analysis gave you a new perspective, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and join us for our next exploration of Africa's changing future. Thank you for being here and watching our video. Every piece of content on this channel is carefully researched, written, edited, and reviewed by our team to ensure it reflects our own work and editorial approach. We do not rely on automated mass production. Each video presents our perspective on current events related to President Ibrahim Traore and developments across Africa.